I think the key thing that I got some useful advice around, which being a mathematician for anyone out there is all about theorems and proofs and how you stack things up in order to get to that proof of that theory. It breaks down to three very simple pillars, as it wants, or levels. It's yourself, your partner, and then kind of everything else afterwards, and family, and then, professional life. And I would say as humans, we tend to get that completely, can I say the word, arse about tit. There's a balance, but there's also an order, right? And I think one is the order, step one, like what are the things that matter to you? What are the things that you enjoy doing? And then build on those and try and find ways in which to make sure that you get a little bit of those things for yourself each time.
Hi, I'm your host Chris Matthews, and you're listening to the Mentor Collective podcast. Conversations that resonate, stories that inspire. In each episode, I'm joined by a guest. We explore their personal stories, the challenges and triumphs which have shaped them, and the invaluable lessons learned along the way. Join us as we navigate through 4 key themes: career journey and reflections, personal and holistic approach, leadership and values, and finally, mentorship, guiding and being guided. In each theme, we traverse the past, present, and future, unraveling the unique narratives of our guests. Welcome to the Mentor Collective podcast. Trev, it's so nice to see you again after such a long time. Thank you so much for being on the Mentor Collective podcast. You and I know each other quite well, but a lot of the people listening probably don't know you. So could you introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself, please?
Thank you very much, Chris, for having me on. A little bit about me. I'm a Northerner. For those of you who haven't noticed, you'll see the difference in this conversation between the accents. I am now currently in between jobs. So I've just left a product management job and looking for other work right now. I was doing that for about 4 years, and prior to that was very good at pre-sales and had quite a long journey in that. I'm based in Suffolk. I work solely from home and have done for about 10 years. So I am COVID trained, as it were, and COVID certified before it even happened. That's a little bit about me. I am a dad. I have 2 very lovely, tiring children. I have a wife as well, which is lovely, and she is lovely. We got married, I think, just over a year and a bit ago, but been together for about 10 years. That's a little bit about me.
That's a good start. Yeah, that's a great start. Thank you very much. And as always, through the course of these conversations, we'll dig through what you've done and where you've been and how that helped you to where you are today. And I guess we can just get going with that, really. So let's talk about our first theme, which is career journey and reflections. There's a kind of distinction I've been making as the podcasts have gone on between sort of the work that got you into your career and then your career work. So like you might have had part-time jobs and bits and pieces when you first started work, and then you really started into your career, which is the things you can really look back and say, oh yeah, that is something that helped me get into X and Y and Z, and that's where I am now. So I guess when you reflect on your journey, how did it begin and how did it get you to where you are today?
Okay. Without taking too long about it, I would say I actually decided to do it shortly after traveling after university about 20 years ago. 2002, I came back from Australia from a year. And I was chatting to somebody at home in Darlington up north, and I was very into technology, playing with computers, fixing them, all of that kind of stuff. Naturally good at it. And I was talking to someone and saying, I quite fancy getting into IT. And they were like, oh, have you got an IT degree? I was like, no, not at all. And they were like, oh, you'll have no chance at all getting into IT, was the kind of initial statement from them back then. My immediate response was, well, I'll show you. And after that, without going into too much in nitty-gritty detail, at the time I was working for Orange, Telco's company, sitting, doing kind of basic stuff with SAP. basically doing returns, actually RMAs for one of the field service reference. Yeah, I was working for Orange, and I wanted to come down to London. I had friends that were working in music, and I wanted to be with them, and so I decided to move to London, and I slept on a couch for 3 to 6 months. I had no place to stay. I got a transfer through Orange. It was still doing the same sort of thing, kind of more business account management. And I was kind of looking around, and I was like, I have a maths degree. I should be able to get work, but I need to kind of elevate into the industry somehow. So I found a company based in London, down in the city, that did training, IT certification stuff. I think it cost me 10 grand for the course. Took out a loan with Barclays, did the intense course for, I think it was 3 or 4 months, got basic Linux, Windows training, all of that kind of stuff. And they also help you look for work, help you with your CV, interview practicing, and all of that kind of stuff way back then. And that's kind of how it all really started, was just, I wanted to do something, someone pushed back, and I found a way forward. I didn't really let things get in my way. I didn't wait to find a flat in London to come to London. I just came to London, and I found a friend and slept on the sofa. And during that time, went to gigs and warehouse parties and all of that other fun stuff that you do in London when you live there. And that's kind of there was the start of it, really, into the industry, quote unquote.
So you were in Orange. You moved down to London, and then what would you say was the start of, and then the kind of continuation of your product management career? What got you there? Yeah,
so obviously when you start that stuff, like you said before, you do a lot of kind of ins and outs jobs of like through your journey. And I think it started in support, and then it's kind of naturally kind of migrated into product management. So I've done everything through support, operations, PS, and now into product management. And I think it's when I came over to ServiceMax, God bless it, and that was 10 years ago. Prior to that, I had been in a different job, which had nothing to do with IT, because I was between jobs, and we can talk about that later, which I thought was a great experience. But whilst coming to this, I'd kind of already wanted to be in product management whilst I'd been looking around for work. And I did a lot of the milk rounds, in London, where you try and find startups and so forth that are looking for people. And all of these startups want experienced product managers for not a lot of money. And I was kind of neither at the time. I was still very much PS / pre-sales. And so I kind of took this job at ServiceMax with an eye to maybe one day I'd come into product management. And I didn't really quite know how it was going to work, because it's a US software company based in the West Coast, and we were based in the UK. And that's kind of, it happened almost by chance, after being there for 10 years, or at the time would have been about 6 years. I'd always talked to my manager at the time, and I'd always said to him that I would like to be in product. And I'd been doing quite well in kind of the pre-sales vein of things. But I'd been getting to a point where I was kind of feeling like I was just going around with the motions, and he was moving on, and I think he was looking elsewhere as well. And at the time, he just went over to the product team over in the US. I think it was for a meeting or something. And he just said, I think it was just before we were acquired by Silver Lake, and they were looking for someone in product. And I'd had 6 years experience at ServiceMax in field service, knew the product and the platform and Salesforce really well. And he said, would you be interested in Trev joining your mobile team? And they literally jumped to the chance. And, I still thank them to this day for that opportunity. It was something that I'd kind of in my mind or always wanted to do. Wasn't quite sure how to get there. And this is what I kind of say to my other half sometimes, is that it's not always about getting to that final point. It's about having an idea about it and kind of chipping away at it as you go along. And as long as you've got that idea where you want to be, that can kind of guide you. And that's really kind of how I transformed and plopped into product management, really. And I don't think there's many product managers out there that go to the School of Product Management from university and then just drop into it. So everyone comes from a variety of different backgrounds. Some are very technical, some are very project focused, some are very feature focused. And so I thought that I brought a rather interesting blend with my pre-sales knowledge and kind of how to position product with value and the platform that I understood to ServiceMax. I thought I brought a unique blend because, you know, some product managers, presenting doesn't come naturally to them, and that's okay, right? You know, they know their product really well, but presenting and talking doesn't come naturally to them. I would hope through my pre-sales experience that some of the presenting and talking comes a lot more natural now. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm right now in product, which I'm very happy about. Very much enjoyed the role. And still continuing to look for it right now.
And what really struck me, I think you mentioned it twice in two slightly different ways, this kind of I'll show you mentality. This kind of like response to challenge or response to people saying that you can't do something, or the situation trying to tell you, no, you can't climb this wall, you can't get over this obstacle. Where do you think that comes from for you? And how much does that, I mean, it seems to very much point you in particular directions when those kind of moments happen, but where did that come from, and does it still play an active role in your life now?
Yeah, I mean, it does. I think it's very much it kind of defines the kind of people I like and the kind of people I don't like, if that makes any sense. I think like's probably a strong word, but I'm very much a person that figures out a way to get things done rather than thinking about how something cannot be done. And that's just born out of, would I want to stereotype and say a coal miner's attitude of being northern, of just being gritty and just trying to get out of a dark hole? I'm not quite sure, but it comes from, I mean, my family, my dad is, self-employed electrician, retired now. And he set up his business just as I was born. And so that's all I've ever known, is he's ran his own business and did it pretty well. And I think he's given me a lot of grounding unknowingly in kind of how to get things done yourself. I've never been given, things easily, and I always try to figure things out for myself. And like I said, there's always a way forward. And I think that played out through my education path in terms of why did I do mathematics at uni? You know, like some people be like, you're crazy. Why did you switch from an IT degree to mathematics? Surely now you're in IT. Why didn't you stay there? And there are definitely reasons behind all that. And if you think about the philosophy of mathematics, which is probably one of the few things I actually remember now, because you learn a lot of stuff in maths that you don't realize you need until you need it. But mathematics is all about a large problem or something, and there is a solution, and the best way to deal with a large problem is to break it down into exercisable chunks. And if you chip away at those chunks, you end up with coming to a solution. So I feel like that for me has been there since, I mean, I think my initial pushback on you can't do this kind of came from college. When I'd done maths at school, I only had, and this is the crazy thing for any younger people out there who are struggling with being told what they can and cannot do right now by school, colleges, and so forth. Take hindrance on this is that at the time I was told I could not do an A level in maths because I only had I think at the time I had a C or a B in maths, but I'd only done the medium tier at GCSE because of the way they kind of box you up at an early age. And like, if you can only be in the medium tier, you can only go so high and so forth. And I was told initially when went to my college, they were like, oh, well, you can't do maths. It would be too difficult for you. It's like, okay. So I went away, and then I came back and I went and saw the teacher, and I was like, look, I think I really want to do maths. And I didn't really know why at the time. I want to do A-level maths. And she went, yeah, but you'll struggle with some of the probability because you didn't do it in GCSE level because you only go so far when you're in the middle tier. I was like, that's fine, I'll figure it out. And I think at that point, she gave me a chance. She said, I'll give you a chance then. And I think I went through and I did a couple of resits on the first time through of like the P1, which I did struggle initially. And I did a couple of resets on the modules on P1 and statistics. And I came out with an A at A-level maths. And the kind of that's was that I think that when I think right back to it and think about like the points at which you can look at something and say, you can't do this, or you go and talk to someone and say, I want to do this, and they take you on. And that kind of probably speared me on, tenfold as the time went on. I kind of early realized that actually you can have a go at anything if you want to. And there will always be people that stand in your way and say you can't because of X, Y, Z. That's not to say that I am a natural troublemaker. But I think I would rather try and make things happen than just sit back and say, okay, then, you've put me in a box. And and I try to instill that in my kids. And also my wife at the moment is going through a journey like this right now. She's trying to build her confidence. And so I'm using that mentoring with her and trying to give her a little bit of a boost as well in terms of some of the things she's doing, because she's historically felt like she could only do X, and she has that little gremlin in the back of her mind saying, you can't. And I'm always kind of trying to help her say, look, but you can. Like, you're the only person that says you can't.
Into how it came about and some of the ways that it guided you. The other thing I wanted to, so thank you for that. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was something that I think a lot of people that go from one part of their career to the next, which is the barrier of paying to either taking time out, which is already a barrier in itself, to do certifications. And then on top of that is the cost of certifications. And I certainly, for my career, when I became a project manager, or when I knew I wanted to, I took a Prince 2 course and I did a Scrum Master and all that kind of stuff. It certainly didn't take me to a 10K or around about 10K kind of mark, which is an incredible amount of money. So I wonder, could you, there's two questions with this one as well. So one was, what did you see in that certification or that collection of certifications that made you think 10 grand is worth that money, 3 to 4 months is worth my time? And also, how far from a technologist were you at that time? Could you talk about that?
So why, I think what you're trying to say is, how did you rationalize in your mind, oh, I got to spend I've just done university. Surely that's a golden ticket, right?
Exactly.
To getting a job. I think even 20 odd years ago, it wasn't a golden ticket for getting a job. And I would say it very much applies right now in the modern day that, school, college, university is definitely something that will differentiate you from others, but it is not a golden ticket to a high salary job. What did I see in that? Well, one, at the time, back in the golden days of free money, you might have remembered that banks used to give out loans willy-nilly to literally anyone. And quite often they would give out loans called, I think they were like, I think Barclays was the one that did it. By the way, I'm no way affiliated with Barclays, and I do not sponsor them or provide any kind of affiliated links to Barclays. But at the time, Barclays were offering, I think it was like an education loan or something like that. And you were allowed to take out up to, I think, tell a lie, it was probably like 8 grand that I took out. And that 8 grand was a combination of a couple of things. The course, as in how much the course cost, but also the fact I wouldn't be working and I'd be living in London. So I factored in the fact that, I might be able to do a little part-time job, but it was pretty much full-time. There was, I think, 4 or 5 certifications across different technologies in IT just to get my grounding. And so I rationalized and was like, well, one, it's just to keep money on the plate and pay my rent and pay my food. It allowed me to focus on one thing rather than, worry about doing a course on the side while trying to do a full-time job and not really focusing on that. And why did I do it? Well, I think when I was working for Orange, which is when I left that to do the course, I think I was on like 17.5 grand in London. Like it was a low salary. And all I was doing was business account management. So it was the business side of Orange accounts. So I was managing like water companies and all their mobile phone activations and stuff. So that's all I was really doing. So I was like, to be honest, it's a low interest loan that I will have to pay back. And if I need to pay it back, and if this allows me to get me an uplift of 10K on top of my 17.5 over a short period of time, then go for it. And that was kind of how I rationalized it. I think at the time, you know, when you're in your 20s, you know, you have a slightly different attitude to risk. And so I just saw the opportunity through the bank, and it was a low interest loan. It was only if you were taking courses, you had to prove that you were using it for a course and not to go on holiday. And so that was the driver behind it. And really, it's something I wanted to do. And I felt like I could try and get a job in IT and work up that way, or I could try and add another feather to my bow and differentiate with a couple of certifications. And the place was based right down in the city in Liverpool Street. And I met them. They were kind of like a startup training company as well. And I met them, and the guy Sunil at the time, who was the owner of the company, he was very nice. And I figured I'd give them a shot. And I felt like the worst that I would get out of it is a broad kind of Swiss Army knife, for want of a word, of sysadmin tools in IT. So not just Windows, it was Windows, Linux, and various other bits and pieces too. So it allowed me to take me from, I have a maths degree and a passion and interest for tinkering with computers, to I'm actually a bit more serious about it, but I'm not quite sure where I want to go.
And do you think that because when I did my project, when I was looking for project management jobs, the first thing that the recruiters would say to me was, you don't have a lot of project management experience, like definition of, so go and do a course, get a cert, and it will demonstrate that you're committed to that career path. How much do you think, now you've done it, and then looking back, how much do you think that was more of a demonstration than it was practically helpful, or helpful in a practical way to you?
I would definitely say it's more of an illustration. If you think about, I mean, it's so relevant even today, as you would appreciate, right? In terms of like when you're looking for work, right? How do you stand out, right? And if you take what you've got and you're just coming out of uni, guess what? You're not alone, right? So you need to start thinking about additional things that make you more interesting, make you look more serious about the role. And I would say that it was probably more along that line of demonstrating that I wanted to do it. And I think my first job was I was literally an IT help desk guy, you know, and I did field service in IT help desk. So I worked for Fabric at one point. I was doing pay-as-you-go IT support in Fabric nightclub in London. You know, in the club, I was doing it during the day. They took on IT support from a company, a very small company at the time, and that's kind of how I started. And one, working for a startup, ironically; two, a company that specializes in IT field service, and kind of I believe that was even quite a low salary job, but it gave me the confidence to push forward in for other things. Did I use a lot of the stuff? Most of the certifications, especially in IT, sysadmin, they expire if you don't keep on top of them. I mean, you know, and that is something that when I looked at the landscape of IT, I was like, where can I go that I can continue to grow my value, but without having to constantly be recertified? And I felt like, and this was pre-cloud, I guess. Well, cloud was just being born, right? You know, 20 odd years ago in that sense. It was very much a new thing to what we see today. And I thought sysadmin, fine, on-premise, yeah, okay, but I can see where it's going. So the kind of sysadmin I was learning was going to become redundant very quick. And then I realized, well, it's going to go more to more service-based stuff. I kind of could see that, even though I didn't really understand where it was going at the time. And I felt like if I could be more around the software, which is kind of how it transitioned from sysadmin to software, maybe I can do something a little bit more interesting. So that's why I went from sysadmin to a software-based company like Experian, and Experian just dealt in software. There I was doing application support, and then I went to PS, and PS was implementation. And then I think this is where all the little layers built into where you asked the earlier question of, how did you get to product? Because after supporting a product and selling a product for a while, maybe you want to actually make a product or get into the nuts and bolts of how does that product get to market, which is kind of where I ended up landing, with ServiceMax, fortunately, in doing that role, getting that opportunity to do it. And only when being in it did I realize, this is kind of where I want to be, right? Mm-hmm. And not 20 years ago, I want to be a product manager. Not how it worked. It was kind of organic and evolution, kind of looking at what you're doing and where do you fit.
As you were talking, there was a moment where I reflected on when I was kind of reaching that point in my early career. So similar to yourself, I started in IT support. But it was IT support for this Japanese organization. We don't have something of the likes in the UK really, but they kind of did everything. They had lots of divisions to try and do as much as they possibly could. And I remember when I was there was the obvious career path to make me advanced within the organization, which was different to what I actually felt like I wanted to do. Like I didn't want to be a better IT support guy. Like I didn't want to move up to second line or third line or whatever. And I kind of found my niche in, I did a few short-term engagements, which I would then come to understand were projects. And that's how I came in. I get, the theme of this podcast is as much about learning from your kind of practical experience, but also looking towards mentorship and, who we've met along the way, or who you've met along the way, I should say, and what they've done to progress you. And when I've spoken about this with other people, I've described a couple of different types of mentors, where you have mentors who are like the positive ones, where you want to replicate what they do or they influence you positively. And then you have negative mentors who you see do things that you don't want to ever replicate, or tell you things which you think, that's rubbish, I'm not going to do it. It sounds like you've had a few negatives in terms of you can't go and do maths, you can't do IT, all those kind of ones. I guess when you look back and focusing on the more positive interactions you've had, you've already spoken about Neil, who gave you a leg up into project management, into product management, I should say. Is there any kind of more general or particular advice that you've received in your career to date from people which has guided you?
Yeah, I think, you will know him from your time because we were at the same company for a little bit. So our MD in Europe, who you may remember, Spencer, was a very interesting fellow. I had a lot of time for him. Occasionally we got confused, being quite similar. I think we had both had short hair and a beard. But our accents were the things that divided us. But he had some very interesting outlooks on change. And I think change is something that we all as humans have to be accepting of. And I think over the last few years, there has been a massive amount of change in our lives, the way the world works, the way the world's working, and the way the world's going. And I think the biggest piece of advice that he ever come up with, and he would always say it, is like, change will happen. It's what you do with it, in terms of, it's like how you respond to that change, which matters. You can sit there and you can and ah and moan about the change, right? But ultimately, you can't really do a lot to affect that change. But what you can do is change the way in how you respond to that, And I think we've all had that opportunity. And I think the entire world was plunged into a state of change recently, where everyone had to think about how they respond to it in order to get through it, because nobody knew how long it was going to last. And I think when you don't know how long something's going to last, the only thing you can do is change the way in which you respond to that thing that's going on, and control that piece, and not worry about too much about the other things, about what prime ministers and world leaders are doing about it, because they will continue to do it. And guess what? They'll be held accountable for it for times to come. So I think we'd say that he had a very good piece of advice. I find the word mentor an interesting one, because I never really look at people as mentors. And I guess it's just a terminology, but it's people that are around you at any given point in time, and you hear them say something and you go, that's a really good point, in terms of you take it on board. So yeah, that's a positive one that I found has always kind of sat with me pretty well. So thanks, Spencer, for that nugget.
The one thing that really resonates with me with what you said there is the idea that how we react to something is within our control. And I think for a vast majority of people, that is a realization which happens at one point. It's not like a gradual realization. It's hang on a minute. I don't need to worry about that or this or that or whatever. And what I want to build on what you said is the idea that how we react to something is entirely a choice. And it doesn't, for a lot of people, it doesn't feel like that. A lot of people don't feel like they can get away from whatever is worrying them or the situation that they found themselves in. But so much of it is a choice. And I wonder, when you think back to your career and up until now, what kind of choices, I suppose you can choose your own path with this one. What choices have you made that, in retrospect, you felt really benefited you? But then there's also another part to the question, which is, are there any choices that you've made that actually, in hindsight, damaged you or didn't push you in the direction you hoped you would go? And what have you learned from those?
What choices have I made that may have... I don't feel... On the damage one, I'm trying to think. I personally don't feel that any choices that I have made to date have damaged me, and that would include my recent decision. I'm quite okay talking about it, about my decision to leave ServiceMax at that point. And there was a number of factors that came towards that, personal, more than anything else, which I've become very open and very comfortable talking about, around my mental state and how I feel in myself, which led me to that. And some people may think that is making a decision to run away or leave something, but it was, again, going to that point around, it's how you respond to it, and you're fully in control of it. Only at the point where I kind of, that, again, just because you're aware of that statement doesn't mean you're always actively doing it.
Yes.
And
100%.
And it's very easy to get pulled into something and think, this is all I can do. And then when something presents itself and you realize that actually I can make a decision here that may better me, my life, and the people around me, and maybe open up other things which weren't happening before that are now happening right now. So I would say I don't ever really look back in anger or negativity on that. I believe change is a good thing, and if you can take the opportunity to embrace it, great. And so leaving ServiceMax on good terms, by the way, and doing that, I feel like was the right thing to do at the time. And it's actually allowed me to take a step back and look at the kind of work I do, what I want to do, my family life, and all these other things, to see and get those things in balance. So for me, that was a kind of pivotal moment. Other people might look at it, and if we look at generations, right, and I use my parents as an example of generationally, they look at me right now and they're like, are you not worried? Are you not scared? Or are you not that? Like, naturally, yes, there's a little bit of worry, right? But also, I feel comfortable in the fact that the challenges I've had in the past where things have happened where I've been told no or couldn't do it and I've overcome them, that this is just another one of those moments in time where I can do that. So I see it as a more of a positive thing than a negative thing, this choice that I have made and taken. So that's where I am.
I really appreciate you being so open about it and the reasons as well. And I think a lot of people I think focus too much on the challenge, right? And like gritting, and they sort of lose perspective of actually what is the personal cost of the grit versus what I could be gaining elsewhere and doing elsewhere. And similarly, your story kind of relates very much with something that happened to me where I was on this project. And it was this engagement, and it was an incredibly toxic environment. There was nothing was ever enough for anyone. Everyone was infighting. It was the most terrible experience. And I was there for maybe 6 months, and it was the tipping point for me was one Saturday. It was a beautiful day. I was driving with my 1-year-old and my wife down to the coast. It was stunning. And the whole way there, about an hour, I was just thinking about what's going to happen on Monday. What do I need to do to make sure that it's not going to all blow up in my face? Who am I going to have to tell? And it was all this kind of stuff. And when we got just before we got to the coast, I turned to my wife and I said, "I'm really sorry. I barely listened to anything you've said the whole way." And it was in that moment that I was like, what the hell am I doing? Like, I've been gritting and pushing and fighting all the way through. But actually, like, there comes a moment where you just have to say, you know what? This is not for me. Maybe it's for someone else, but it's not for me. And do you obviously that happened to you recently? Do you, or maybe not exactly like that, but and I don't.
You're putting words in my mouth.
What you said. Okay, let me rephrase. Which is that obviously that there came a moment for you where you were like, okay, this is my decision moment. It's not working for me anymore for whatever reason. I need to move on.
Yeah.
I guess you feel free to be as specific as you want to be about it. But I guess what were those kind of criteria for you, which I guess now you maybe look at going forward to try and avoid and to direct differently. What were those criteria that you thought, okay, bam, now's the time?
I think when I was reflecting on it at the time, and I was trying to figure out, it was that kind of decision point time, and there was a lot of stuff going on very quickly at the same time. And I myself, I wasn't, and this is the weird thing, we run our professional lives, and we are humans too, hence the nature of your podcast, right? And I think, it's okay to say, I've had enough, right? And I think, or it's okay to put your hand up and say, I can't do it, or I'm not coping. And I wasn't really coping. And at that point, I wasn't spending the right quality time or with my family, and that in itself comes in a lot of different flavors. It was like my work was important, but it was becoming like a candle to a moth, right? It was like all I was really hovering around the whole time. To your point around, driving to the coast, you should really be in that moment and not in the moment on Monday, right? And I looked at that and I was like, And then I looked around me and I was like, what really matters to me? I love working remotely, right? As I said, I would say I'm COVID certified because I've been doing it for over 10 years, right? Even before the pandemic. But I'd say what really matters to me is the people around you in the role that you do. So I don't like the idea of 9 till 5 working in an office, Monday to Friday. I think it's not productive for people in our industry. We do not need to be behind a desk in a glass building pretending to work, right? I'd say people who are good at what they do will work wherever you put them, and they will make good of the tools and resources they have to get the job done, right? But in saying that, I think there's a massive value in having people who do what you do near to you, be that geographically or time zonely, to mince over things, talk about things and kind of bounce ideas and so forth. And I was finding that my closest peers were not close enough to me, and I was not connecting physically. It was all done remotely. And I think we're seeing this happen right now, as a result. We're seeing the transition of the 9 to 5, collar workers going into a business, right? Even in IT, until very recently, it was very much a thing of you sit behind a desk and you do everything there. To fully remote, which worked really well, but has its downsides, I would say, especially from a business perspective and also from a human connection kind of thing. There are ideas, there are things, there are bits and pieces that happen when you see people. And so as I move forward now, I'm very much looking at businesses, companies who have teams doing the kind of work I'm interested in product, that are more closer to me. And by closer, I mean, I'm okay going to France. I'm okay going to Germany. I'm okay going to, even traveling 4 hours on a plane. It's not a problem. But every day working from a long time zone in the West Coast to another time zone in India and being slap bang in the middle, I found it was just like really, really challenging to get to the next level of where I wanted to be. Because there are sometimes you have to make decisions or make calls and you can't because you're just not in that time zone. And I'm not a person that will adjust my entire time zone and working time zone both ways to fit, although it was naturally creeping that way. And I felt like this has to stop. And, through going through therapy, and seeing somebody, which is okay, by the way, to go and see someone. In fact, if anyone who's listening, who cares and is struggling right now with trying to make a decision or do something, find someone that you want to talk to and talk to them and pay for it. Don't wait for a handout to go because, I did that. I was like holding it off and was like not doing it. Because of my private health I was like, you know what? I already know somebody. I'm just going to pay him and I'm going to do it. And you know what? It was the best decision I made. Yes, it probably cost me £1,000 or something in the long run, but like, hey, it helped me go through that process because I needed that extra external voice to go through stuff. And that person really helped. And I think when you get to a point in your career and you need to make some choices and think about what's important, there's no harm in talking to a professional person. I think in the US, they're a lot more open to it than us, stuck-up Brits have been in the past, but we're getting a lot better. Then to take another stereotype of men versus women, I think women are exceptionally good at talking about how they feel and how they're thinking. Men suck at it, right? And, there's a big support group around mothers, but dads tend to get forgotten about. And I've noticed through, my own self-reflection that, like, if you're a dad professional, it can be really quite lonely. There's a lot of support there for mothers and they tend to congregate around each other. Dads just don't. And it's really weird. And it's still something that's a big problem. I talked to my therapist about this and she totally agreed with me. She even tried to set up a specific, workshop in our local town with it to try and drive, just dads get together and talk about your kids driving you nuts, or whatever, Women are very good at it, and they are very good at being in touch with those things, and guys not so much. And I've learned to be okay with my vulnerabilities, in terms of my misgivings and talking about it. And I thought long and hard before this, like, would I talk about it? And I thought, well, why wouldn't I? Because I think it's important that people understand that it's okay. It's okay not to be okay sometimes.
And I think, first of all, thank you so much for volunteering to be an ambassador almost for this topic, and I know you're not taking on any ownership of it. This is a very much a pro therapy, therapy friendly podcast for sure. And I think the one thing, because this is a whole separate conversation almost. But what I would like to inject into it is that I think there's a wrong conflation, and there's always been, between what someone doesn't have right now or is holding them back and their ability to be effective in their role. And I think actually when it comes to personal and mental growth or healing or anything like that, that doesn't need to get in the way of anything of what people can do. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are doing things even on a daily basis that they find very, very challenging, that other people might not know they find challenging whatsoever. And getting or seeing someone, I like the way you put it, seeing a professional to work through ideas, whether that is simply, hey, like, I can't process whether or not I'm happy in my life right now, versus I don't understand why every morning I wake up and I feel like I'm about to go into battle, or whatever it is. Like that, just because you have those thoughts doesn't make you a worse project manager or a worse professional or anything like that. And there's plenty of high functioning people. Like I remember, who was I talking? I think it was because I have a therapist, and I, like you, I just find it, some weeks I don't have anything that I even think I want to talk about, and we get there and we're like, yeah, really sort of helping me to sort things out. And the first therapist I saw, she said to me that that she had a CEO type of person who would have panic attacks throughout the day, but they were trying to manage it and in such a way that it wasn't impacting what they were doing. And someone could say, well, maybe you shouldn't be in that role, but they chose to be in it, and they chose to go through it. And coming back to, again, what we choose to do, and clearly they were effective doing what they're doing because they still had the position. So I think it's a great thing to bring up, and thank you so much for bringing it up.
No, it's a huge topic, and even myself now, talking, don't be under any illusions that I have nailed it, right? And I think that's another thing to understand and be okay with. It's just ever evolving. It's okay to do the things that you enjoy, and sometimes doing the things that you enjoy may not be the same as what people expect you to enjoy. The key thing is, and I'm trying to figure this out with my dad at the moment, because he's starting to, as he retired, he's starting to lose his memory. And, he ran his own business for like 20 plus years, and he was working nearly every day of the week and very good at what he did, very, very astute at it. Then he's retired and stopped, and lo and behold, his memory's going, his short-term memory. And I've been saying to him, you need to find the thing that builds on what you enjoy, right? And then put that into your hobby or pastime and do it, right? Because you don't do Sudoku because people say doing Sudoku helps your brain, right? No, you do Sudoku or Sudoku, whatever you want to call it. I don't do it because I don't get it. And I'm a mathematician. I just don't get the point in doing it, right? But it's just whatever that is, doing that is the thing. And it can be physical, it can be mental. It doesn't have to be, what people sometimes say is, oh, if you go and run a marathon, every year, you'll be better. Maybe you will. Maybe you'll have a heart attack after your second marathon. But it's as long as you're doing something that in yourself you feel like you enjoy it. And I think as you go through your professional career, sometimes you drop off the things that you enjoy. Then there's the dad journey. Yeah, another recipe for like ditching the things that you enjoyed. And I would actually say, sorry, step back from that. That's a parent journey. That's not a dad thing. That's a parent thing.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
Whether you're a mum or a dad, I would say, you know, I watch my other half give up so much, you know, in a personal life, her own being, you know, physically, you know, and now she's working through all that stuff and trying to get on with the things again as our kids get a little bit more self-sustaining at the age of 6 and 7. So, you know,
let's leave them with a TV. They'll be fine. This is really nicely leading us into the second theme, which is personal and holistic approach. So let's go there. But yeah, I feel like it just needs like a moment to kind of come out of some of those topics, right? Because they're deep things, they're important things. But I wonder if we can kind of maybe repurpose some of those thoughts into this next piece here. The one that I am most passionate about, the question I'm most passionate about on all these podcasts is about how you balance your professional life with your personal life, work-life balance. And obviously you've got a very recent experience of some drastic action that needed to happen to regain that. So I guess maybe you can sort of talk through, we've done how it got there, I guess. So I guess going forward, how will you sort of make efforts to balance your personal and professional life? And what does that even mean to you, I suppose, as well?
I think the key thing that I got some useful advice around, which being a mathematician, for anyone out there, is all about theorems and proofs and how you stack things up in order to get to that proof of that theory. I would say it breaks down to 3 very simple pillars, as it wants, or levels. It's yourself, your partner, and then kind of everything else afterwards, and family, and then, you know, professional life. And I would say as humans, we tend to get that completely, can I say the word, arse about tit. And so we end up doing the complete opposite and leaving ourselves, you know, me, as it were, till last. And I think everyone that goes through that realizes that I have just not spent any time on myself. I've given all my time to, some people do all my time to my kids, for example, right? Some people do all their time to their job. Some people do all their time to maybe their passion, which is, you know, one particular thing. And it's getting that, I think there's a balance, but there's also an order, right? And I think one is the order, step one, like what are the things that matter to you? You know, what are the things that you enjoy doing? And find them, right? And I'm still trying to figure some of those things out right now, because I think I kind of left some of those behind over the last 20 years. And then build on those and try and find ways in which to make sure that you get a little bit of those things for yourself each time. Balancing it, I think I would love to know if anyone's got a kind of secret sauce for this, because I think it's really difficult, because it's ever in flux, right? Like right now, I'm doing some things that I enjoy. It's all around gaming, but like I'm enjoying it. I keep checking myself. I'm like, am I spending too much time doing this? Right? You know, because I'm like trying to think about, well, my other half. I'm trying to think about my family. And then I'm like, well, actually, I also need to do a little bit of focus on, you know, what I might be doing next as well in terms of a job. And a lot of people in my position might have done the other thing and just focused about finding the next job, which I think would have been wrong, because all you'll be doing then is going from one thing to the next. And I think by looking at the things that I enjoy and spending a bit of time with those, it gives me a foundation to fall back on that's mine. No one else can touch it. And I think when you look at it like that, and then you look at your partner and how you can help them, that was your next foundation. Your children, weirdly, become number 3. And that, you know, when I went through that with my therapist and she explained it to me, and I was like, actually makes a lot of sense. Because God forbid if I lost my children, whatever that might be, I can fall back to my partner. God forbid if I lost my partner, I can fall back to me. If you stack them in any other order, it just doesn't work. If you focus everything on one of those other things and one of them, if that goes, what do you fall back to? And everything else it's like a house of cards. And that's kind of how I think about it when I'm trying to prioritize or balance stuff out. The how in balancing it out, catch me in another couple of years in terms of figuring that out. But whenever I'm thinking about what I'm doing or what it is I'm doing and how I do it and how I prioritize it, I think me, my partner, my family, and that allows me to tear it up nicely. Any decision I make and anything that I do, because it always allows me to fall back to me, which is the single most important foundational pillar for doing the other things.
Thank you. I don't think I've got any questions on that. That's a lovely little wrapped up present for everyone.
Okay, fair enough.
Then let me ask something else. Yeah, you mentioned a little bit before about dad in work. I wrote down dad in work in my notes. One of the things that I see frequently is that dads seem to be expected to give up more time for their roles than mums. And the way that I see that play out, and this is just my own experience, is it always seems to be the dads that are doing the flying and the traveling and the mums stay at home. How much of that do you see from your perspective as well?
Well, firsthand, if I was to be totally candid, and if I again go back to the generations, my dad was a self-employed, he's an electrician. His traveling was very much, donated by the distance the VW transporter could go, right? But that's about it. But he traveled a lot and was quote unquote away from home or working many hours. My mum stayed at home, made food, brought up the kids. And so I think, that's just generationally, and if you keep winding it back, how it's always been. And I think now you look at it, and I have seen my expectation, I guess where I found myself was that's kind of the road that I ended up going down anyhow, just doing all the work, traveling, whatever, focusing on that, while my other half just did all the family stuff, right? You just like, I don't want to be one of those stereotypes. All of a sudden, I am in one of those stereotypes. And I think you're right. I think is it expected? I think it happens, right? I'm not sure if it's expected, because I think it's unfair to say that now. I think I've experienced in the last few years, and I think COVID being one of those interesting situations that really shone a light on people and their lives and how they did things, right all the way up to an exec level, right? There were points where everyone had a kid in their office on a Zoom call that was either, I've just pooed my nappy, and you need to put someone on pause and turn the camera off while you do that and then come back to a call. And that is regardless of whether you're a mum or a dad. I think everyone went through that experience. And prior to that point, and this is why I always found it fascinating that thing we were going through, it would have been very easy for me or any man to be saying, I'm out for the day, I'm working. And you're just removed from that. They just never, and you come home and you see your other half and she looks pretty worn out and disheveled. And she's like, how was your day? And you're like, it's fine. She's like, how was your day? And you go, how was your day? And she's like, fine. And you don't get to see all the bits in the middle. And I think as dads and men now, and, I just want to caveat that this is my perspective, is not me generalizing. My dad looks at me and he's like, I don't know how you do what you do. Like, he sees me doing my job, my work. He sees me finishing my job, my work, coming out, grabbing the kids, doing the bits and pieces that I do. He never did any of that. And he's quite open about it. He's like, I worked, I came home late, I had my dinner, I went to bed, and then I would go to the pub. And, there was nothing wrong with my dad. He's a very good person. It's just the generation of that kind of mentality. And he doesn't know, and I think he found it hard as a granddad, which is something that people don't realize, is that when you become a dad, your parents become grandparents, and they unexpectedly go through a realization of transformation too, that they need to step back from what you're doing to allow you to do what you do. And initially they don't, but like when they do, they realize you do your way. And he looks at me, he's like, I don't know how you do it. Like, I was never as much hands-on as you are. In my mind, I'm like, I'm not hands-on enough. It's the weird thing. It's like, I don't think I'm doing enough, right? All the time. My dad looks at me and he's like, you're doing loads. I'm like, right, okay. How do I rationalize that?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things, isn't it, where you sort of, especially coming out of the pandemic, and like you, I work almost entirely remotely. You kind of, when something new comes along and it potentially takes you away, or this is how I see it, it takes me away from maybe doing the school pickup 2 or 3 times a week. I'm like, oh my God, but like, I'm not going to be around for my kids. But then that whole generation before, and I was talking to my dad about this, just came up naturally in conversation sometime, and he was saying, well, there are some weeks I didn't see you, like the whole time. I would wake up before you woke up. I would get home after you'd gone to bed. And I think it's an incredible privilege, especially for us in IT and working in the UK, and that we can work remotely and see so much more. Like my wife's mother is here. She's staying with us for a few weeks, and my daughter, who's 3.5, is downstairs right now. And I know that when I finish this time with you, I can go and see her. I can go and pop on some calls that I'm going to do this afternoon. I can come out and see her. It's amazing, and it's such an incredible privilege. And the one thing I will say, you reminded me. I heard my mum told me that my uncle, when they had their child, my grandfather couldn't believe that my uncle was changing the nappies of his child, and he said he really made a big deal about it. He's like, "What are you doing? What do you do? That's not for you to do." And it's incredible. I hadn't really considered or sat and reflected on what you were saying about how a parent becomes a grandparent, and there's a whole new set of expectations. And I think actually now, with the way that society is rocketing on, there's a whole. I heard a story that one of my parents' friends, their child had a child, and before they asked, how can I explain this so that it makes sense? So their child asked their parents to go on a childcare course or something like that, because they were worried that things have moved on so much from when their parents were parents that like they've maybe forgotten things and all this kind of stuff. But I at the time I was like, that is absolutely ridiculous. But now there are so many things now that are said to be beneficial for the child. Like napping is a really big thing, right? Like napping is like they've got to nap, this and that time and all that kind of stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine who's not even a generation, she's only 10 years older than me. And she was like, when I had my child, there was no such thing as napping. They just go through the day. They want to sleep, they go sleep, whatever. And now it's like very regimented, So things do change, and I can feel like change is becoming a theme of this conversation. What a great thing! Thank you so much for taking us into what you see as being a father, from your perspective. Before we move on to the next theme, challenge, I think, is the challenge and change maybe are the other themes here. When you've been challenged, you've persevered, and you seem to have like your instinctual reaction is to go bam, sort of headbutt through the challenge. Almost to demonstrate that you can, let alone because it's something that's positive for you. Where do you get your motivation from? Or how has it come about? Maybe that's a fairer way of saying it.
It's a really hard one to explain because it's kind of just part of how I am. I think in some ways it's a natural sense of stubbornness. I do have a little element of stubbornness about me, which people who know me will know. And I'm very outwardly spoken. I say what I think. I don't proclaim to be always right. Obviously, I like to be, but that's okay. But I do that element of it to challenge people that I'm engaging with in the hope that if they think I am wrong, then if you can come up with the why and all of those pieces, which again, weirdly, as I reflect on what does maths mean to me, right? And anyone who's done a maths degree will tell you what they take away from it. And it's not just about how to add up, right? Weirdly, you do very little adding up at degree level. It's all about how you break things down as a philosophy and how you deal with things. And by making a statement or by doing something, I hope that I will instill a reaction or a response that I can work with or break down or continue with. And I guess that's where it comes from. So it comes from doing 3 years of mathematical theorems and proofs where you take anything and you make a statement and you either prove it by contradiction or, prove it by inducing something else into it to make it true. And that is kind of the fundamentals of mathematics, essentially, when you're learning theorems and proofs, for example. And indirectly, it's become part of the way I think. And, whether it was there beforehand, I don't know. But it is really about that, to be honest, Chris. And it's a really hard one to say, where does it come from or, how to do it. It's just how I deal with things, put something out there, make a statement. Someone can go, hey, that's nonsense. I'm like, okay. I might get a little hurt by someone telling me it's nonsense, but that's natural. But work through it, and maybe there's an answer out at the end of it, which is that iterative kind of process of trying to come up with a solution again.
Let's move on then to the third theme, which is leadership and values. One of the kind of themes that we typically explore or that I have explored with other people on this podcast is, as a leader, being able to identify that your character trait is not the norm, and sometimes your team is made up of people who don't share the same character trait, right? So there might be people who have a great deal of perseverance and grit when compared to everyone else, but then when compared to Trev, don't match in the slightest. If they're told that they can't do something, they just sort of sit there and listen and go, okay, maybe I can't. Let's think of something else. So I guess when you work with teams, when you work with clients, because obviously you lead clients through solutions and or at least in a particular direction, how do you balance the strong trait that you have, which is don't tell me what I can't do / I can do something until it's proven otherwise? How do you balance that, and how do you with other people's perspectives, and how do you lead people along with you when you get into those kind of situations?
For me, what I have learned, the best way, no matter what no matter the kind of type of person that you are, I think is slightly irrelevant in this sense, because the question is more like, how do you get people to rally around you? And, no matter what you bring to the table, there are always going to be people that bring different things to that process, right? You can either isolate them and say it's my way or the highway, right? Which is, I've seen it, I can't think of specific examples, but I've seen it where people, you can only do it my way. If you don't do it my way, you might as well just go and find someone else, right? I personally don't think that is a very positive, constructive attitude. The way that I have done it in the past, and hopefully people have recognized this, is that I just trust people. And so trust is one of these things that I try to instill in other people. And I've seen it in my last role with, maybe more junior people who are still trying to figure out where their values are and what they're good at. And rather than prescribing to them and telling them what to do, kind of just give them a bit of an open remit and say, off you go, come back to me and let's talk it through. And I have seen by trusting people, and I think this is something that I've seen done in leaders that have, led me, for want of a better word, when I'm entrusted to just get on with it, I do better than when I am told what to do. So by managing and micromanaging people and kind of carving them to do it my way is not productive at all. It will only make that person do exactly what you want them to do, and then they'll go away. Whereas if you leave it open a bit and entrust them and say, hey, we're trying to meet objective this, why don't you go away, figure out some stuff, we'll come back, and allow them to do it. Now, I'll caveat that with, there are obviously people that when you do that, don't do anything. And so at the same time as trust, you sort of instill with them and say, well, with trust, that becomes accountability, and so you have to be accountable for those things. And I will recognize you and call you out for the things that you do to help me along. And so I've done that in the past, and I saw it, I think when I was leaving ServiceMax, I got some really nice words from colleagues that I'd only ever met through the medium where they're talking right now. And, some of them said some really kind things to me, which must have reflected on the fact that they felt like I trusted them. Because if you don't trust someone, there's only so far you can go in a journey. And especially through this medium, right? By putting your human self first, by allowing people to see, oh, I screwed up. Yep, I did it wrong. I don't know. Tell me about this. You get people to lean into you by being a bit more human, because nobody's perfect. If you try to put forward a perfect view of who you are and what you do, then you're not really doing yourself a service, and people will only lean into you so far. So I've always tried to be like that, like I am me. I've really tried very hard to be me in my professional world as much as possible, in the way I talk, in the way I greet people, deal with people, engage with people, as I do in my personal life. Because that way, hopefully the transition is easier. Of course, there is a lot less swearing when I'm in my professional life than when I am around my children. But beyond that, I just try to inject some of that humanity into it, and then the people follow. And without that, they will literally see you as someone that person is only doing these things probably to better their own kind of agenda, and I'm a component in that. Add a human layer to it, add a bit of humility, add a little bit of, I trust you to do this. If you don't get it, don't worry, let's work through it. Just allows people to lean in a little bit more.
Do you? So I guess in your, and thank you, I completely agree. And authenticity and the human in the machine is a recurring theme for sure on these podcasts. And thank you for your expression of it. I guess part of my question was also about how do you manage your own expectations working with people who may not have the same kind of grit and determination as you. But I think given that you didn't pick up on that, it sounds to me like maybe you don't actually become frustrated with if people, oh, you do? Tell me about it. So how do you deal with that? How do you manage that?
I go into my personal mode and rant and swear a lot. And I think acceptance is a good thing, right? I think, as I've seen that and witnessed that, there's only so much you can give people or allow people to do. And like you say, some people will thrive on that. Other people need a little bit more steering and kind of expect you to say, do this, do that. And that's okay. And I've kind of come to the realization that we are a cocktail of personalities out here in the human world, and that some people are like that. Yeah, when I put the phone down or finish the call or leave that person, I might rant about it. But I think ranting is okay. And I think acceptance, again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning about change and how you deal with it. It's very much the same thing here. You can get massively frustrated with it, or you can accept it and just kind of bite your tongue and move along and hope that person eventually realizes by, maybe doing something when someone entrusts you to do something and coming back with not just the thing I was looking for, but actually you've come up with something else, or you've come up with a way of tackling that problem, or you've not just come with an answer, you've said, actually, I thought about this and this, and I've seen it a few times, and I've been like, wow, that's great. We've got a few ideas to work with here. So for me, handling it is just about acceptance, I think.
I've been flirting with the idea of forgiveness recently as well. I think it's like the same sort of vein, of like, whereas I would see that more as like, if I'm talking to someone and they're like a bit of an arse, or they're not getting it, or something, coming with like a pre-canned forgiveness, so like which is, I guess, like a form of acceptance. Like, I'm accepting that you might not get it right now. I'm forgiving you that you're not getting it right now. Or I think in my line of work, dealing with clients as a project manager, often, you find yourselves in situations where things are getting dicey and a bit hairy, and especially close to go live. I've got a go live right now that I'm working on, and everyone is on fire at the moment. So pre-canned forgiveness, I found, has been quite useful to allowing myself to move on from things. So thank you for giving me some thought on acceptance. Maybe I'll try acceptance. It sounds a bit less patronizing.
I forgive you for being rubbish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I forgive you for being rubbish.
I mean, that's not actually what's happening in my head, but it's more like I suppose actually, what we are talking about is slightly different things, right? Acceptance is more like, okay, there's a path there. I'm going to accept that you're going to take it in that direction, and I'm going to let it go. And I suppose what I'm talking more about is where people maybe overstep, or their behaviors don't match, or something like that. The ability to say, I accept that's the way you are, and I forgive you for being annoying, or being whatever it is that the reaction has had in me, even if it's not to do with them, even if it's just upset me because I'm upset that day. I find that to be a really useful tool. So let's talk about the fourth theme, which is mentorship, guiding, and being guided. I've stopped actually asking people if they've got a quote or a piece of wisdom, because everyone's just like, no. There's only one person that said I've got a quote.
It's funny because I was looking at your questions, and like there was some question. Where was I here? I was like, are there any specific books, movies, or art forms that have profoundly influenced your perspective? And when I looked at it, I was like, books. I was like, no. I was like, movies. I have so many films that I like, right? But haven't necessarily. Would I say they've influenced me? No. And then I was thinking about it, and then you left it extremely wide open with the statement of art forms. And for me, something that was quite a large part of my early life was music, or for want of a better word, being involved with musicians. Friends of mine started their own music label. We did it in Manchester, and then he moved to London, and we did stuff in warehouses and tube stations and all sorts of stuff. Anyhow, I'm not the musician. I was just part of that label doing more of the back end stuff. But he was the musician. But something that's always been important to me, that brings me out of any situation, sorts me out and levels me, is music. And I find that question, when it's asked, is like, I can't think of a film that I could sit and watch that would just like do the same as music can do. I probably can't think of a book either. But music's interesting because I put together like a mixtape playlist on YouTube, which I can give you the link to. And I was putting it together, and I was actually doing it quite haphazardly this morning because I'd been thinking about it for a while in my head anyhow. And it has a kind of theme. Most of it's electronic music, which kind of goes back to how I grew up as a teenager. But some of it are music videos as well, which I feel like in this day and age, music videos have kind of fallen by the wayside with. So I've kind of walked through, and I think there's like 10 tracks there, some of them longer than others. But I've taken them through Future Sound of London, Orbital, some stuff by Sasha, Kraftwerk, Laurent Garnier, Boards of Canada, and Uncle, and Daft Punk. And all of these tracks, like, I can put on with my headphones, and they can kind of just kill out the rest of the noise, and they all have a slightly different feeling to them. Some of them have some excellent videos, especially some of the ones by Uncle, particularly, and Orbital, some excellent ones there. But I figured that like maybe music could play a part of this, because I think everyone has a different, and that's not to say that the only music I enjoy is electronic music by a long shot, but a lot of it comes from way back 20 years ago. Some of it's a little bit more recent.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, as you may or may not know, I'm a musician as well, and yeah, for sure, music is just like a portal to the past, like the present that you didn't know was there. It's an incredible, magical thing, for sure.
It does, and even from a memory point as well. So, like, I can go and play a track, and it can rewire some of those kind of memories that I thought had gone, and I can literally put it on. As I can smell the food I was having the first time I heard that, and it's an amazing thing, and to be working with people in the early years who were doing their own label, electronic music and stuff in London, that was quite a fun time to be part of. Although I'm not an electronic musician myself, but it was quite an interesting perspective to see all of that going on.
So let's move on to the final theme, which is our conclusion. So when you reflect on our discussion that we've had today, is there a particular insight or moment that stands out to you as particularly meaningful or impactful?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know if I was going to be as transparent about, what's been going on with me. And I've been, I would say, 60-70% transparent, enough for people that were listening to go, hey, okay, I didn't realize that was going on. I hope he's okay. Yes, I am, by the way. And I think it's good therapy to be open about that. And I think it's not something that comes natural to me, believe it or not. And so doing it, I think, is part of the reason why I think I initially said yeah. Although I didn't know until the moment whether I was going to go down that or not. It was very much a gut thing, which is very, very, very close to how I am. I'm very much like, if you feel it in your gut, then go with it. You're probably right. So yeah, that's for me, just being yourself and being a bit more transparent, and accepting the fact that it's okay to be not okay, is a great thing. And I think there needs to be more people, male people, who can do that. There's a plethora of female people doing it. I don't see a lot of guys talking like that online, unless I'm just following the wrong people on social channels. I don't know.
So as we wrap up our conversation today, first of all, again, thanks so much. I think we've been to so many different places, right? And this conversation has been so great. So thank you for being so present and bringing yourself to the conversation. I guess, what do you hope that people take away from our conversation today?
What do I hope that people will take away? You know what? I hope that people have got this far and just go away and think about themselves, their partner, children, and other things. And do they have that stacked up in the right priority order? Because when that got explained to me and I literally broke it down, even to the point where if I lose two of those things and all that's left is me okay? Am I happy with me? And at one point, the answer with that was not really yes. If people can go away with that, then I'm happy at that. If anyone wants to give me a job, that's great.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Mentor Collective podcast. If you enjoyed it, you're welcome to subscribe. You're also welcome to go to our website, thementorcollective.net, to find out about the other good work we do in mentorship. Wherever you are, I hope you have a great rest of your day.